Hi everyone, Wendy here today at the Denver Museum of Miniatures, Dolls, and Toys. And today we're going to take just a small look into a really great part of our collection, which is the black dolls in our collection. Now, black dolls are harder to find. Even today, finding a black baby doll, you will have less choice when you go to a store. It's getting better. But I was a kid in the 80s, and finding a doll that looked like me was easy. That kind of representation has not been available to Black people across the world. Today we're going to talk about 20th century dolls, and not our folk dolls and not our international dolls. We divide our dolls into collections. So we're going to talk about 20th century mass-produced dolls. So 20th century means 1900 through 2000. There's some people would say 1901 to 2001, but you get the idea. So this was obviously a huge period of change. You see a real ramping up of mass production coming out of the Victorian era. Factories become more of a thing, more of a middle class, expendable income, toys being something that kids didn't just have one. Frequently they had lots. And when we start talking, especially 1950s on, toys are everywhere. There's no longer just you have one doll or one teddy bear, but you have even lower income kids will have many toys and many dolls, not just one special piece. So when we talk about black dolls in our collection, we are always looking for black dolls. And part of the reason we are always looking for black dolls is that there are a lot of racist stereotypes reflected in the toys of different time periods. So the first one I'm going to talk about is going to be the Golliwog doll, which was based on a book by I took notes, by an American writer named Florence Kate Upton. She created this character in 1870, and in 1895, when she moved back to England, she wrote a very popular book called The Adventures of Two Dutch Dolls. So it was the story of two Dutch dolls, Peg and Sarah, and their friend Golliwog. Now, Golliwog was based on American Black minstrel characters and caricatures. And that this doll style wasn't new, but this name Golliwog and how popular these books were really changed the conversation. So he in the book is described as a horrid sight, the blackest gnome. And Upton, reminiscing about a black minstrel doll that rag doll she had as a kid, said this: seated upon a flower pot in the garden, his kindly face was a target for rubber balls, the game being to knock him over backwards. It pains me now to think of those little rag legs flying ignominiously over his head, yet that was long ago, and before he had become a personality. We knew he was ugly. So this is clearly a very different time, but 100 years ago isn't really that long ago. And these Golliwog dolls were gained popularity through the 1960s. So this one was recently donated, and you can see this caricature. These hands that aren't really hands, they're more like mitts, the really frizzy hair, the wide smile, and this sort of, this look you'll recognize if you have any familiarity with minstrelsy in the United States. It's a caricature, it's not a person, and these were so popular. They were second in popularity in the UK only to teddy bears. So we're talking about a real cultural phenomenon. And originally they were lovable but ugly. And then later you see new authors like Enid Blyton, who was a hugely successful author who wrote 3 books that focused on Golliwog from 1944 to 1955. And then the character turns from being ugly but lovable, which is, not good, to much worse. He was an unkind, mean-spirited, visually hideous, frequently a villain and a thief, at best a trickster. So this stereotype got worse as time went on. And this Golliwog was made by the company Merrythought. You can see his tag right there. And that company didn't even exist until, I believe, was founded in the 1930s. And they're not the only people making these. Steiff, Schuko, Levin, Merrythought, Deans, all made Golliwogs. And in the 1960s, when Golliwogs started getting pulled from the shelf, there was blowback similar to the Little Black Sambo conversations that we have had in America. And you see things where the term wog, short for Golliwog, becomes a racial slur against dark-skinned people. And Golliwog also becomes a racial slur against dark-skinned people, and not just in England, but in Germany, Ireland, Greece, and Australia. So it's also a term I found, and I'll link to this essay, that it was a term used for pets too. So this is pretty recent history, and when we picked this one up, the donor said, I tried to sell it on eBay or Craigslist, and I got a lot of pushback and people calling me a racist, and she was very upset. And I had a similar conversation with her. And this had been a toy that she was fond of as a child. So this is someone who is older, but, still living. So, and we have this conversation a lot with people. And I think it's an important one to have, especially when we see these prevalent depictions and caricatures that perpetuate negative stereotypes in our culture, to recognize that we need to preserve this so we can't pretend it didn't happen. But we also need to move past this and have the hard conversations and recognize things we've done wrong in the past. So this is Golliwog. So this is something I knew basics of this, and I read more about it today. Really fascinating. I think it really helped bridge that late 1800s, how this caricature was still so popular and is still seen so often in material up through the 1960s, and why there's still so many living people who have these very fond memories of this doll. There's even, this was a fun fact, we'll end with this fun fact about a racist stereotype, but even Debussy, the classical composer, was so taken by his daughter's Golliwog doll that he had a movement in his children's corner suite called the Golliwog's Cakewalk, and there's even more racism to deconstruct in that phrase, but I think it really shows what an overwhelming presence this depiction of Black people has in European and American culture.